It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to focus on two topics. That is boxing, and the other topic is Conor McGregor's earnings, his wealth, what he's done with it, how he came by it, what his external businesses look like, what his earnings inside the UFC look like. We're even going to wax poetic a little bit about what we think about the White House card and if he'll actually make it there. We also have a couple of updates on the antitrust lawsuits. But if you want access to all of these things, please subscribe and subscribe with your money. Because if you are not a paid subscriber, you won't have access to everything because about half of the show ends up behind a paywall. So, John, we've got a lot to talk about today, but I first want to check in with you and see how the heck you've been doing.
Oh, well, personally terrible. But besides that, fine. I just had to go to the office. I like working when I'm in the office 50% of the time. So it's always a bad day when I have to drive to the office. Although traffic with the Jewish holiday wasn't so bad today. So, yeah, I just don't like driving to the office.
I'm rooting for you to be able to work from home all the time.
I appreciate that. You know what? I might have to put you on the phone with my boss.
I'm your biggest cheerleader, man. I don't know if you realize that, but I'm your biggest cheerleader. And one more time, big snaps and kudos to you because I love the artwork from our last episode. I don't know if everybody knows this, but John designed that artwork and I just freaking love it because it's perfect. It's on the nose. And we even talked about it in our last episode where John mentioned the Monopoly octopus. And it's so perfect. It really is. And you've been working on new ones too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we say working, I've been using AI, which I personally hate, but it's, it generates art. But you know what? AI is just, you give it explicit instructions to do what to do exactly, and it freaking can't do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because I put instructions to make a tentacle. A lot of the AI site says it can't build it. It's too disturbing. Or maybe they think anything tentacles is like weird sexual stuff and they might get in trouble, but it won't make tentacles for me. I just realized that there's a programming that says we do not do tentacles. I did not realize that for a lot of them.
It's like John does tentacle porn.
Yeah, it must be assuming that, like, who would possibly want tentacles wrapped around a guy like this unless there's some sort of porno here? Listen, you know what? Don't kink shame over here.
All right. On that note, we're going to go ahead and dive in here. Now, there's been a perceived hiccup with the Lee versus Zuffa antitrust case payouts. Now, it's not a real hiccup, but it could be perceived that way because the payments haven't gone out yet, right?
No, they have not. And I had gotten some text message today about that from certain people who are involved in the suit, fighters and their management. Yeah, it has not. Now, we mentioned this when a couple weeks ago, a couple times we mentioned that one of the steps, I think you asked me, what's next? And I go, well, the judge has to approve the distribution of the claims, right? The settlement. There's a final approval by Judge Boulware. And we kind of assumed that it was automatic. He was going to do it. The date given for distribution previously by the plaintiffs was September 30th. So we kind of assumed that'd be the last date possible that the judge would sign it. They have a form. I tweeted the form. So if you go on my Twitter account, you'll see the form that they sent to the judge. All he has to do is sign that. And so everybody's been assuming that the settlement claims for the Levy-Zuffa case, those checks are going to go out. But lo and behold, it looks like Judge Boulware has not signed them. He has not signed that order, the order to distribute. So the checks have not gone out. So everybody's waiting. And I think, based on the replies I got from people, I think a lot of fighters and their management were just not aware that there's a possibility that it would not go out by this date. Even though, and I don't know what the plaintiff said, but in the paperwork it says that needs the judge's approval. And on our show, we said that's the last hurdle. The judge has to prove it. Although, to be fair, if you listen to our show, I think we also worked on the assumption that Judge Boulware would sign it because it looks like they did everything he asked for. But again, he has not signed it yet. So until he signs that document, they cannot distribute the money. And I guess the next step, too, is I don't know what happens if he waits too long, because the plaintiffs, the people that are taking care of Angion, the people that are taking care of the money, that money's sitting in escrow gathering interest, right? And so when it collects interest, that has to be distributed too. So do they have to go back and recalculate everybody's payout if it goes too long? I don't know.
Wow. I hope somebody has reached out to Judge Boulware.
I hope he's listening. People are wondering, where's their money?
Yeah. My goodness.
I wonder if Judge Boulware went and spent it all.
Is there any logical reason why he wouldn't have signed it that you know of?
Not that I can think of. It's been posed me as a theory that maybe he was upset about something in the Johnson case discovery, but that doesn't make sense because he would be upset. He seems upset with the defendants, and this is just hurting the plaintiffs. I don't know why he hasn't signed it. Maybe something's going on in his personal life and he just hasn't had a chance. Maybe there's something he wants to double check before. Maybe he wants to wait just so that the interest adds it, so it hits a certain number. I have no idea, but he has, as of the moment we're recording this, that day, he has not signed and handed in the order to the motion to distribute the funds. And so until he does that, they cannot send out the checks and wire payments.
Oh my gosh. Are there any updates for the other classes?
Yeah, there is kind of an interesting update. It's not much of an update per se, but it is, they have a joint filing concerning the discovery, which is basically what they're filing. They're reporting is I guess would be the schedule that's going to go forward for the case. So they have an outline of how they expect the Johnson v. Zuffa case to unfold going forward. And we want to look at that real quick. They submitted a joint submission regarding the case schedule. So if we look at that, it tells you basically how they expect the case to unfold. The defendants are to file reply in support of any motions to dismiss in Davis. That's by October 9th, 2025. Defendants are to propose custodians and search terms by October 31st. December 5th, the plaintiffs are to respond to plaintiffs' proposals for custodians. So we go through that. Close of fact discovery will happen August 15 of next year, 2026. Plaintiffs' opening expert reports on class and merits for Johnson will be filed by September 16th of 2026. Then we have the opposition experts by December of next year. And so it goes down and down. We keep going forward. Defendant's response to class certification motion would be June 23rd, 2027. Replies to any Daubert motions, July 23rd, 2027. And then motions for summary judgment, replies for class certification motion would be July 30th, 2027. So if you remember the last case, how long it took between the expert reports, the hearings, based on this, we will get, if this sticks to schedule, we will have class certification about 2 years from now. And then what happens after that, they expect if class certification is granted, you're talking about 240 days, 8 months after class certification to go into the pre-trial. So trial will start within a year. So that's relatively rapid compared to what we saw last time. So that was the big filing, laying this calendar out. And again, we've talked about this in the past, as I bring up. This case, Johnson v. Zuffa, along with Davis v. Zuffa and Serkinov v. Zuffa, barring some obstacle spring out of nowhere, it seems like Judge Boulware's intent on having this go faster than we saw in the previous case.
One question on all of that. What's a custodian?
The custodian is the person that handles the evidence for discovery. I shouldn't say the evidence, the material. And so they look through it to hand over what is proper for the case and then remove stuff that's not necessary for the case that it should not be viewed by the plaintiffs or the defendants.
Oh, okay. All right. Moving on, we're going to switch gears here now and get into the first of our big topics, which is boxing. Now, the Saudis seem to be making even more moves in boxing, this time with Matchroom and with Boxer, who we talked about last week. What can you tell us about them?
Well, the Matchroom one, unless it's changed in the last few minutes or whatever when we recorded, the contents, they have a big announcement plan. The Saudis are going to be working with Matchroom with boxing and 2 other sports, I believe snooker and darts. But I don't know the full details yet of that deal. It's mostly groundbreaking, but who knows what the deal is per se. The Boxer's kind of interesting because it's a sponsorship deal for Riyadh season with Boxer. And if we've talked about Boxer several times in the show, and their finances have not looked good. They had injunctive relief they had applied for. I shouldn't say injunctive relief. They had an injunction, yes, to basically block a former executive from taking any job outside because they blamed him for basically derailing their Sky Sports deal. And now he's, they make the claim that he was planning to shop around to get a new deal to take their place. And so they're financially not doing good. Last year, when we looked at their finances for last year, they had a large amount of liabilities. They're well in the hole. They did report in their filings for that recent case that for the year they look much more financially successful this year. I don't know where the money's coming from, but they claim an EBITDA of 1.2 million for the year end and 2 million in cash in the bank, which is just very different from the finances reported earlier. But if you look at it, they were heavily in the hole last year. They lost their Sky Sports deal that paid them much more than their BBC deal does now. And they're going to get an injection of cash, I should say, from Riyadh season, much needed for Boxer. So Boxer looks like, it was a lifeline thrown to them by Riyadh season, and they are taking it.
So it looks like Riyadh season is snapping up deals right and left with everybody they can.
Yeah, everybody is dependent on Riyadh season, and with what's going on with Zuffa boxing and the whole way the industry is working right now, it's something to keep an eye on, but also be a little concerned because if you're not Zuffa boxing that has this Paramount deal and partners with the Saudis, everybody else seems to be very dependent on access to the Saudis. So what happens if the Saudis turn against them? Any of those promoters, I think that's the big concern everybody has. Also, can you really push back hard and confront Zuffa boxing if you're not happy with the way they're doing business, if you're dependent on the Saudis keeping your promotion afloat? There's a lot of these questions floating around, and I do not know how these promoters are going to handle this, the current landscape, considering that all the money seems to be coming from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, UFC Qatar, which is happening on November 22nd, is going to go head-to-head with Riyadh season's Ring 4 Night of Champions. Now, what do you make of this? Knowing Turkey, do you think he's upset at this turn of events?
I don't think he really is, because this was booked separately. They're separate entities. They know the UFC does business in the region, and you got to remember too, it's the United Arab Emirates, according to accounts, is they have exclusive rights to UFC events in the Gulf, and they co-negotiate with the UFC, and they get a split of that when they negotiate another Gulf region. So when it goes to Saudi Arabia, a UFC event, a portion of that money that for that site fee goes back to the United Arab Emirates, the company they're working with. So in some ways, if Turkey was going to be mad, would he be mad at the UFC, or would he be mad with the United Arab Emirates for booking this UFC event in Qatar? I got a feeling he doesn't really care, because there is not a ton of overlap between the fan bases, except for the biggest events. And, the UFC has been in the region plenty of times before. I just don't think he's too concerned about it, taking too many viewership away, especially considering most events in Riyadh don't seem to be drawing many fans anyways.
The WBC, they posted a letter welcoming Zuffa to boxing and then went on to list all the regulations that make boxing different from MMA. What should we make of this letter?
Well, if this is the best defense the WBC can make for why, I should say it was a kind of a backhanded defense. It's like a ironic, sarcastic welcoming the UFC and then laid out all the regulations that exist in boxing that the UFC, or not the UFC, I should say, Zuffa boxing will have to deal with. But if this is the best they can come up with as their response to Zuffa boxing, man, they are in trouble, because this was very pathetic, I thought. Because it as it said, it noted all the regulations and basically said, in boxing, there's, we don't have exploitation because of this. And, who are you convincing, right? Because that is one of the weeniest defenses. Everybody knows there's still problems with boxing. I think the exact line was, therefore, boxing has eradicated exploitation and abuse of power. Has it really? Has it really eradicated those problems? And you think that with the eyes and the spotlight now going to be on the sanctioning organization, and seeing that how that's going to be the number one target for Zuffa boxing and its supporters, you would hope that the sanctioning organizations and Solomon and the WBC especially would get their act together and think, we got to do something to actually promote to the benefit of boxing. Do something which is supposed to be the purpose of the sanctioning organizations, to look out to do stuff for the benefit of boxing. They're the one entity in boxing whose objective is to treat it like a sport, where the promoters are there just to make money, the boxers are just there to make money. The bylaws of these sanctioning organizations almost all say the same thing, that it's to improve the spirit of boxing, to improve the camaraderie and the sportsmanship, and just benefit the sport. Paraphrasing here, but that's all of them have that, and yet none of them take that job to heart. That's their purpose, and none of them live up to it. And you would kind of hope that in response to what Zuffa boxing is doing, which is going to put them out of business, instead of just pretending everything's fine so they can collect their sanctioning fees, they would say, we've got to actually demonstrate that we are good stewards of the sport, so we can show that this is a pointless endeavor, unnecessary endeavor by the folks at Endeavor, I guess. So look at that hidden pun there. Wordplay. But yeah, it was a feeble attempt to defend themselves and go after Zuffa. And I thought, if this is the best that they can do, if this is the way they're going to target Zuffa boxing, then might as well, quit now while you're ahead.
Dana White announced he'll be working on a new boxing ring design and rule change. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the boxing ring thing, I think some people made a bigger deal about it. They hear that and they think he's going to change the size of the ring, the structure. Part of it was, he had LED lights on the edge at the Canelo Crawford fight. It's an aesthetic look. I think it's all aesthetics he's talking about. I think he's talking about what the color of the canvas and the lighting and stuff they'll have on it. He's not gonna. I very much doubt he's actually gonna change the size, because that's dictated by the negotiated by the boxers and the commission. Although maybe they'll have rules that every ring is gonna be the same no matter what in Zuffa boxing. But still,
they're gonna put everything in an octagon.
yeah, it'll be an octagonal shape. They'll have, maybe they will. Maybe they'll come up with a stupid shape, and then they'll, just like the octagon cage, they'll copyright it.
Yeah.
That way no one else can use it, and it's just theirs. But I doubt that. Boxing's always been a ring. I think it's just aesthetics he's talking about. And for the rule change that he mentioned, I think that, again, I don't think he's actually talking about the rules per se in the ring. I think, he's being a little loose-lipped, flippant about his comments, and people are reading into it. But I think he's talking more about the overarching rules for Zuffa boxing. Maybe, he's talking about like no mandatories and things like that. That's my guess, because I do not think, again, as a stickler, they were to like, embrace the unified rules because it protected the UFC. I think they're going to be the same with Zuffa Boxing. Their changes might be stuff like, I mean, maybe they find a way to negotiate a different weight class. They can, if they can eliminate the supers, but they can, find a more convenient weight class for what they're looking for. Maybe that's possible, but I doubt that.
Dustin Poirier wants to box Nate Diaz on a future Zuffa boxing card. Do you think that's something that could be one of their tentpole events?
Probably not. I think they don't seem much interest, or they don't seem that interested in putting on MMA, UFC fighters in boxing matches. Now, I say that, but I'm talking to people. There is just an incredible interest or desire or demand to get big spectacles put together, because that's what the networks want. That's what the audience seems to want. And if Zuffa Boxing has these tentpoles and they're working with Netflix, and Netflix is going to pay out a lot of money, it does seem conceivable that I think they're going to want to focus on prestige boxing and kind of build up their profile, build up their image as putting on world-class fights. But it does seem possible that if Netflix is, dangling some money, but I don't know if that would be the biggest fight possible. But again, it is conceivable that they decide to use UFC fighters on Netflix if they think you can get a bigger rating and more money. I just don't think that's I don't think that's a priority. I think that's something much more like PFL is trying to look into. Like what kind of spectacles can we put on to get either ESPN or Netflix interested in our product? Who can we pit against Francis Ngannou? What other type of fights can we make? Can we entice Jake Paul into something? I think that's the one more likely to do that kind of fight right now.
Since we have started our transition from boxing into UFC, Conor McGregor, that's where we're going with this, just for the listeners out there to understand the method to our madness. So right now, we're going to jump right in with Conor McGregor, because he has been making the rounds with media, and he has declared that his fight on the White House card is a done deal. He told Sean Hannity on Fox and Friends last night that it was a done deal, but a report came out less than an hour ago. We are recording it. It is now 12:01 a.m. on October the 3rd, Friday, October 3rd. So this is just literal hours before this show goes to air. And in that interview clip, he says that basically, he says that the deal isn't done, that he has 2 fights left on his contract, and that UFC has a choice to make: either secure him for that White House card or let him go. He was also earlier today at a Bare Knuckle FC press conference, where that he was having Mike Perry face off with Jeremy Stevens, and then he said that maybe that he would fight the winner, and then him and Mike Perry got into it. So, I mean, there's so many different aspects that are coming out of Conor's mouth, and I personally do not think this is happening. I don't think Conor ever fights again, at least not in the UFC. But I have to ask you, are you beginning to believe that maybe Conor being on the White House card is happening?
No, I mean, it's possible. I think he wants to, so maybe it happens. Maybe just because there is, as much as, some of our listeners and some of the people on this show might not like Donald Trump, might be disgusted by the thought of working with him. He's a lot of the fighters are big fans of him. They find that they view that of doing a fight specifically aligned with him enticing. And I think Conor McGregor is one of those guys. He's enamored with Trump, enamored with the president, working with him. And so I think it's, I do think it's unlikely because I do think all of his problems, both physically, chemically, and personally, make it very unlikely that I think he gets back into the ring. But that doesn't mean I think it's impossible, because I do think there's a strong possibility that he wants to. And maybe he goes out his way to actually make this fight, no matter how bad he looks, no matter whatever happens, he makes it to this card. But I would still lean towards him not fighting, because I just think you look at the guy, you see his behavior outside the ring, and it seems unlikely that he'll ever get his act together enough to get back into fighting. And also, he's back to just saying shit.
Yeah, yeah.
And just saying shit is people find it entertaining, and we live in a world where he is rewarded by just saying shit, because a large portion of the people that follow Conor McGregor do not do anything more surface than just listening to what he says and finding it entertaining. But a lot of what he's saying, as you noted, it's a done deal. He's asking for $100 million. The UFC has to do right by me or otherwise release me. None of this actually adds up to a coherent storyline. Mm-hmm. And so, the question is, will he actually make it to the cage?
Jack Slack said on Twitter, and this made a lot of sense to me, that it seemed like Conor didn't really want to fight, that he was talking himself into it through all of these interviews, that he was trying to work up his courage, that he was trying to talk himself into getting in fight mode. And that made a lot of sense to me, because that's what it comes across as. But I'm sorry, I'm not as the possibilities, they don't seem to add up to me at all. I know that you're a little more optimistic than me as to his fighting chances. Not optimistic about, I want Conor to fight, because I know that's not you. When I say optimistic, I mean optimistic as to whether he actually does it or not. Not me. I'll eat my goddamn shoe if that man gets into a UFC cage. I will eat my fucking shoe.
Well, I wouldn't take that bet, because there's a strong possibility that he runs in and fights someone in the UFC cage on a night that he's not booked.
That's different.
So you've got to be careful with that. You got to be very specific when you talk about.
I need a sanctioned fight. That's what I'm talking about.
It's again. I think that White House appeal is so strong, as we've seen with a lot of fighters, that it's possible, I wouldn't say he gets his act together, but he makes an attempt to be on the card. But, he's got a lot of fucking issues.
He does. He does.
And it's like, do we really want, I don't know who'd be excited. He doesn't seem like anything close to the Conor McGregor that was worth watching fight. And he's got a ton of allegations. I don't even allegations. He's found civilly liable for rape.
He also has a lot of pending lawsuits too.
Yeah, so it's just, he's got a lot of issues to deal with. He should handle his personal life and these other issues than worry about getting in the cage. His days of cashing in as a fighter are long past.
I do have one more question about the White House, and that is, what kind of money is being set aside for the festivities by the committees that are controlling that, and how much of that funding, if any, would go towards Conor's pay, or would that come exclusively from the UFC?
So that would be the money coming from the semi-quincentennial fund, the congressional fund they allocated to it. Now, Conor's making a big deal that he negotiated directly with Trump. I think, as we noted, his other comments make it sound like that's just Conor saying shit. I don't think he negotiated a deal with the White House. Maybe he had some discussions about getting tickets or spots for friends of his, because he's one of the few fighters that Donald Trump can, name, named as his favorite Irishman, and knows that he supports Trump. Colby Covington is someone that Donald Trump has probably no clue who that guy is. And we'll be sitting around looking for scalpers. We'll be sitting in the in front of the Lincoln Memorial, watching it on the big screen. That's the only negotiation I can see him doing with the White House, but his purse will be paid by the UFC. The UFC will have to put in some money. Dana White made a thing we're talking about how we have to spend $700,000 to replace grass, like it's a big expense. the question is, how much of the other infrastructure costs, the other costs are going to be taken up by this fund? Because Congress has already been given something like 30 million in previous years to get ready for this 250th anniversary. They have 100 million for next year they're going to spend to upgrade the facilities, to set up, I'm imagining set up like the park and stuff, to set up the viewing spots. So the UFC might have a lot of their costs covered by this, but I do think the UFC, it's likely, kind of like the Sphere Show, the UFC will likely spend a lot of more money on production than they normally would. And they will make a big deal about that they're spending all this money as if they're doing it and as a tribute to the country. But they won't mention the benefits they get out of this. As we mentioned previously, and I know MMA Draws talked about this. I mean, think about the access to power they're going to be at this event. Think about the sponsorship they can be able to collect from this event because the viewership. Think about how much of their deal with Paramount, how much did that increase the amount because they knew there probably might be a White House show that they're bringing in, that they're going to have this massive show at the White House. So the UFC is going to benefit tremendously from this event. And they will, I do not think technically us, the taxpayers, will be paying Conor McGregor and the fighters' salaries. But in some ways we are, if we're setting up the infrastructure and spending all this money so they have an event that they can make a lot more than normal on.
Conor's business issues. Let's go ahead and break those down right quick, because his forged stout is going to end up in court over alleged unpaid debt. Now, I actually got that story from your timeline. What do you make of that, since you went to the trouble to repost it?
Well, it just kind of shows that it's in trouble. It's not, he did not recreate Proper 12. He did not get the same outcome of that. And you look at it, he has a judgment because he has not paid a vendor. I mean, actually, a lot of the finances, a lot of the information is sealed because that's just the way the Irish courts work. You got to infer stuff. But based on the reporting we saw from people that cover the case, there's a judgment against him for 10,000 euros. So that person can go get what's owed him. And that suggests that there's more that's owed. The other thing is, apparently, based on the finances from the court, is Irish Stout has 3 million euros in liabilities, which means it's out $3 million it owes. And so there's probably a long list of people besides this one company that they owe money to. And this does not seem like the roaring success that Proper 12 was. And so he was not able to recreate it. And they pointed out, too, that a lot of the losses, the losses and problems seem to happen after the verdict, the decision against him in the civil case. So that has ruined his image. I know a lot of places dropped his brands. I know that the Irish public has turned against him over the years. And that has taken probably a direct hit to the finances of his company here.
In light of stories of mounting debt and losses to his various enterprises and mounting legal fees, let's go ahead and break down those finances now. Can you run down one more time how much Conor McGregor was paid just during the Lee class period? Well,
I know a lot of people always ask us about this, and that's partly why we're breaking this up, because you have newer fans. You have older fans that maybe not heard us talk about this before, and they've heard the stories of Conor McGregor talking about he made a lot of money, and newer fans that are just intrigued by how much he made. And you put that together, and then it's always a demand to kind of go over this again. But to break it down, we have his actual finances from the Lee class period, from the period, his first 9 fights in the UFC. Almost all of them are the same reported purses he had. An example is at UFC 178. 178, he was there on the undercard of a pay-per-view. He was not the main event. He got 75 to show, 75 to win, $50,000 fight of the night bonus, I believe it is, a performance of the night. So 200,000 total. He got nothing besides that. So no discretionary bonus, nothing. Against the fight night he did that January, he got $245,000. So all of his amounts that he got, he has a slightly higher than average UFC contract. but he was not getting huge sums of money. He was getting basically the amount being reported to the athletic commissions. And when he got his discretionary, his performance of the night's bonuses, there was no additional discretionary bonuses. But then we get to UFC 189, and we see from that he had $2.11 million, according to the lawsuit, in a discretionary bonus, locker room bonus, which made his total for the night $3.285 million. Sorry. And then from that point on, he made a lot more than he did previous. He fought at 192, which sold over 1 million pay-per-views. And for that, he got $4.477 million in pay. And then in UFC 196 the next year against Nate Diaz, the second, third, and fourth highest purse of the year were all Conor McGregor. In 2016, the only one that had a higher purse for a single fight was Brock Lesnar at UFC 200. So at 196, he got $5.576 million. At UFC 202, we got $5.615 million. And then finally against Eddie Alvarez, he got $6.8 million. So you add all that up, his total amount he made during his UFC career, his 9 fights, what the lead period compensated him based on, he made a grand total of $26 million.
How much do we think he was paid against Floyd Mayweather Jr.?
Well, we unfortunately do not have his finances on this, and we have some reporting, though. We do see that the UFC got a big bump in their revenue that year. We do see that Forbes reported that the estimate he made $85 million. Other places said he made $130 million. The estimate was that I heard and seemed to line up with a lot of the other information was that it was a 70-30 split. Mayweather got 70% of the revenue. Conor got 30%. If you recall, originally Zuffa Boxing wasn't a named promoter on that event. A few weeks before, Zuffa Boxing got added as a promoter. The reason I was told was the likely reason people assumed was because Zuffa Boxing perhaps was nervous. I shouldn't say that Zuffa was. They weren't boxing. They hadn't promoted yet. But the UFC's company Zuffa was the name promoter. My understanding was told that they might have been maybe getting nervous that if Floyd paid him directly, them in Showtime, that maybe Conor wouldn't give the money that he'd owe the UFC back. And so they got attached as a promoter record. That way the revenue, the money could go to them, and then they could pay it out to McGregor. And so if it's a 70-30% split based on the amount of revenue made, Zuffa, as a promoter of this boxing event, probably got somewhere around $130 to $140 million in revenue. The other often cited is that it was close to a 50-50 split between Zuffa and Conor McGregor. So if it made, let's say, high end $150 million, it was a 50-50 split, McGregor would have got $75 million. So you're probably, when you look at the variables, he probably got anywhere from 65 to 75.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!